Hi everyone, it's time to build the 6th item on Stash Mountain. In this video we'll assemble kit number 2 from the World of Fantasy series by Masterbox in 24th scale. Before we start on the build, I'm going to highlight my personal impressions regarding this kit. On the sunny side, both of the figures are expertly sculpted and even the smallest parts are very detailed. The parts are molded in such a way that the figures are assembled quite easily. The list of paints required for the figures is very comprehensive, with options for both Vallejo and life color paints. And there is a nicely detailed painting guide at the back of the box which gives great suggestions for how colors should be applied when painting the figures. An alternative head for the beast was included with the kit, which was a pleasant surprise. On the shady side, there are no instructions except for the schematics on the back of the box, which do point to most of the parts on the sprue trees. There were a lot of seam lines, especially on the smaller parts, which needed to be taken care of. There were some fitting issues, mostly in places hidden in the final model, but there were also a few gaping holes which needed to be filled and sanded. For the most part, I am very fond of Masterbox figurines. Their detail is always good, and they often depict interesting scenes which are great for adding extra character to a diorama. I give the kit a respectable rating of 3 golden ostrich eggs. The box art is really colorful and detailed, and I love the look of the lady warrior's armor depicted on the front of the box. An alternative coloring for her armor was shown at the back of the box, but I didn't like this as much. Masterbox included a detailed color table with specific reference to Vallejo paints, so I decided to use them in this build, as the table made paint selection pretty simple. A closer look at the sprues shows very intricate detail on each part. I just love the pattern on the armor, and could tell on first inspection that it would look outstanding after some dry brushing. There is very little flash, although there were quite a few seam lines, or actually the correct term is witness lines, on practically all of the parts. If you have ever wondered where witness lines come from, I have a link in the description to an excellent video by Martin, the international British modeler, who discusses this feature in depth. After the usual wash with warm, slightly soapy water and a quick rinse, I detached the first parts of the beast of burden from their sprue. I carefully trimmed the excess using an X-Acto knife. I glued the main parts of the creature's trunk, deciding to do so in stages, as the parts needed to be shaped slightly to fit them together. Eventually I resorted to clamping the two halves together and let the glue cure for about an hour. While the beast was resting, I separated some of the main parts of the warrior from their sprue. I trimmed their witness lines by scraping them off very slowly using a hobby knife. One needs to use a bit of caution when you employ this method, as one slip could be disastrous. I glued together the legs of the figurine, and the parts did fit together quite nicely. Small holes were drilled into selected parts, and small brass rods were glued in, which would make the task of painting a lot simpler. I added some reusable adhesive putty to the chest of the warrior to make it easier to glue on her other parts of her chest at a later stage. All the parts were given a quick coat of grey primer and left to dry completely. I selected various Vallejo skin tones, hoping to get a natural look for the parts of the warrior's flesh which were exposed beyond her armor. I applied the flesh-colored paints in thin layers, starting with the darker colors first and gradually diluting them upwards with the lighter colors. This method was intended to bring out the highlights in her features, and it worked fairly well. In the same way, I painted the various parts of the beast, using several thin layers of paint in order to build up the color slowly while still preserving the detail. I painted the smaller parts which were suspended on brass rods, while some of the very small parts were painted still on their sprues. As I assembled the head of the beast, I followed the illustrations at the back of the box religiously, for these pictures were all I had in lieu of assembly instructions. However, I was a little confused as there were quite a few extra parts to the head which were not mentioned anywhere on the assembly diagrams. After some trial and error, I was pleasantly surprised to find that an alternative head was included in the kit. Instead of using the docile head on the box art, one actually has the option of using a more fierce-looking head for the beast. I didn't much care for the creature's tongue which was provided by the kit. I wanted to give him a longer, more reptilian tongue. So I hauled out the trusted old frog's eggs and used these to mold a truly dramatic looking tongue to match his newly acquired fierce look. And yes, he is a male dragon. The kit is very anatomically correct in this regard. Having decided to opt for the fierce-looking head, I carefully scraped away any paint from the areas where I wanted to apply some glue. I used extra thin cement to attach the creature's head to its body. Unfortunately, the fit was less than ideal and required extensive filling before everything looked reasonably passable. I removed the brass rods from the various parts of the warrior's body and cleaned up all the surfaces to which glue would be applied. I attached the various sections carefully, checking each one for accurate positioning. I stripped the material I was using to mask the chest, removed the required part from the sprue tree and glued it into place. Before attaching her head, I used some Citadel flesh wash to blend all of the flesh colors a little more and to highlight the darker areas of her skin. I used various other washes on the beast himself and on the leather gloves and boots of the warrior, and also on her armor and weapons. When the washes were dry, which took only about 30 minutes, I added her luggage and glued the tail to the beast. The tail also needed a lot of filling, but I really loved the way the end of it was shaped to create a seat for the warrior to sit on. I thought this was really a unique touch by Masterbox. The last part of the build consisted of attaching her arms and head to her body. There were some challenges to fitting these neatly, mostly because they were such small parts and difficult to position. However, these nasty joints were obscured by armor and other parts of the model, so it wasn't too much of an issue. I really like this kit, and I'm especially fond of the subject matter. I have noticed from previous Masterbox kits that fitting is often an issue. I don't blame the kit, however. I think it's more a case of the modeler needing to be spot-on accurate with the fitting, as any two parts which are to be joined need to be positioned exactly right. If one's angle is just a little off, it's time to haul out the filling putty. And with that, I'm calling it done. My figure painting is gradually improving, and I'm becoming happier with the results. I still have a lot to learn, but practice makes perfect. So long, and thanks for watching.